Welcome to Tune In 2022, my part 4 video, what I learned covering the astrology of 2022 and into 2023 for essentially the past month. I began by doing 3 videos which are available at planetwaves.tv, our YouTube channel, one each for the cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs. And then I spent the next month reading these charts, each for about an hour and 20 minutes. Some went a little bit over, and I promised a kind of a summation, closing arguments video, which I will now offer you. We are in a very different year, a very different mini era of history than we were in 2020 and 2021. There are a number of major things that have changed, including having reached the end of the Saturn-Uranus square, which is a rare event that lasted all year, and the end of the Pluto-Aries square, an even rarer event, which lasted, even if you don't count the margins, it lasted a solid 2 years, from January of 20 all the way out through around December of 21. And in many ways, those squares were driving events and perceptions. And we were in the kind of the very throat of the Saturn-Pluto cycle. For students of Richard Tarnas, you know that this is a pretty harsh cycle that last had like a big appearance at September 11th, when we all know what happened there, and the global transition that occurred. A similar thing happened with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, because my perception of the astrological readings that surrounded 9/11 was that while there were a couple of readings that predicted terrorism on or around that day, and for example, Rob Hand, who's a pretty erudite and worldly guy, predicted a war with Afghanistan, that turned out to be true. That lasted for the next 20 years, incredibly. No one said that the owing to the events of the 9/11 incident, the world would change irrevocably, and there would be a complete reformation of political life, and in many ways of civic life, and that there would be no turning back from that. And a similar scenario played out with the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, because you might have said, well, this is associated with conservative contractions and with control dramas and with even with plagues. I mean, that's in the notes on the Saturn-Pluto cycle. But no one said the entire world is going to change irrevocably. Beware of false flag incidents, because we learned from Saturn-Pluto in the opposition in 2001 that there's false flag incidents left, right, and center surrounding that. And we kind of lived through 20 more years of false flag incidents, meaning things that were either blamed on the wrong person or events that were exploited politically, where the exploitation had nothing to do with the event or the intent of the actors. And we don't really know who did a lot of the things that happened, including 2001 and everything that happened between then and now. So the astrologers were off, and to call Saturn-Pluto the COVID aspect is really to miss the point of what happened. It's kind of like the dancing figure in front of the screen, and then you miss everything going on in the background, which is where most stuff is going on, is where you can't see it. It's not showing up in the mainstream press. It's banned or censored from various platforms and all this stuff. So I think that astrology continues to miss the boat on what is happening. In any event, those events, the events reshaping the world and geopolitics and the economy and people's point of view were driven by the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto in January, the first square of Pluto and Aries in January of 20, all this in 20, and then the ongoing square of Saturn and Uranus all through 2021. Now, I mean, if you know any astrology at all, you know these are major incidents. I mean, these are not small aspects; they're rare aspects. They both involved Saturn. They both all through there was a Saturn-Pluto, mutual factor. Whatever they were in aspect with, Pluto was always there. Saturn was always there. In the beginning, it's Pluto and Saturn, and then that splits off into Pluto, Aries, and Saturn, Uranus. And what it's created is a tremendous amount of fear, instability, controversy, contention, challenges, and seemingly endless and ongoing challenges that we have been facing. And we are now entering very different territory. So I'm going to do this in a slightly different than chronological order, but not that different. I want to start with the movement of Jupiter into Pisces. At the beginning of, the very end of 2020 was Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Pisces, in Aquarius, in the first degree of Aquarius. That's a big deal to have that. It's a 20-year event, and to have it in the first degree of such an important sign as Aquarius is a big deal. And what that's saying is that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction commemorates the fact that Saturn has changed signs, which does a lot less often than Jupiter does. The social environment is largely described by Aquarius, and what we had was a tremendous amount of overwhelming social pressure driving things, particularly in 2021, and almost consolidating the results of all of that smashing of the social order and contention, and in a way giving people something that they could cling to, even if it was bossing around their neighbors or either employees or customers in some way. I would point out that a lot of the events and the developments we're seeing are driven by a kind of petty tyranny, of neighborhood level petty tyranny, of a lot of people thinking that they're doing the Lord's work by bossing you around. And I think this was more about Jupiter in Aquarius than it was about Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn in Aquarius is a much more reserved and conservative influence. Jupiter has now moved on as of 1228, 1229, depending on what time zone you were in. So Jupiter is now in Pisces, leaving Saturn behind in Aquarius. And Saturn left behind in Aquarius is more of an influence that, to me, is going to foster individuation as much as it fosters group identity. What we had with Jupiter in Aquarius was this obsession, this trend, this style of group identity. Jupiter is a style indicator. So if you want to know the fashion of any given year, which tends to change year by year, interestingly, you look to Jupiter for that information, and now Jupiter is in Pisces, and this is a little bit more laid back, kind of come as you are, a little bit more power to the people than power to the elite of Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter will now move clear through Pisces. It's going to go through between now, the late December of 21, clear through around May 20th approximately, and then it enters Aries. So there's going to be a retrograde-free run of Jupiter through Pisces. We already had the retrograde last year, and there are two major whistle stops along the way that Jupiter and Pisces thing. I'm still a little putting myself back together after a month of going at this stuff nonstop. The two main stops are the one that we're approaching now, which is Jupiter conjunct Nessus, and then Jupiter conjunct Neptune. So Jupiter conjunct Nessus is going to magnify all of the conspiratorial bad behavior of people that we have been seeing, a lot of which has been driven by Nessus and Neptune in Pisces. The Nessus in Pisces is the bad behavior, and the Neptune in Pisces is the public's denial of that bad behavior, which is also a form of bad behavior. The antithesis to fraud is not merely that the entity committing the fraud be good. The antithesis to fraud is to not believe the lies that you are being told, and there are still people who are acting like it's April of 2020, and we have to believe every last thing. And like there's been no data that's come in April of 2020. We didn't really have very much data. Now it's January of 2022. We have a lot of data. We're supposed to look at that data and make a reevaluation of what occurred. But anyway, I think that we're over the next month or month and a half, maybe 2 months into March, going to see an enlargement of the consciousness of this. I can't give too many details. It is YouTube. An enlargement of the perception of a kind of a microscopic view of this bad behavior represented by Nessus, and also seeing some consequences, because there are a lot of consequences, and we're seeing a lot of the consequences come back, and people who are talking about those consequences are rapidly getting banned from platforms, Robert Malone among other people. Then comes Jupiter conjunct Neptune, and my concern with this is that it's extremely idealistic. That's the good part. It can also be very delusional. We have Jupiter magnifying the delusions of Neptune. So that's it'll be what it'll be. It has a little bit of go to sleep to it, as Jupiter conjunct Nessus has a little bit of wake up to, or a lot of wake up to it. So we're going to need to voluntarily stay awake. I mean, this is the thing, and it's not always easy to voluntarily stay awake, especially when there are so many wonderful reasons to go back to sleep and pretend that the fifth booster will finally bring everything back to normal, and maybe raise all those people from the dead. Okay, so that's that. Then Jupiter arrives in Aries. This is an important event because Jupiter is going to cross the Aries point. It's going to make contact with the charts of many past events. So more on that another time. But we begin a new Jupiter cycle, or at least we warm up a whole new Jupiter cycle with Jupiter going from Pisces to Aries in May. It'll then retrograde back in. So we'll have one last experience of Jupiter in Pisces. Okay, now the next thing of maybe 3 or 4 major topics. Let me just wrap up on Saturn in Aquarius. This is going to demand a lot more discipline than Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter in Aquarius is I won't go far to call it a joke, but it's not really very trustworthy, and it's one of those Aquarius placements where it thinks it knows a lot more than it does, and if anyone corrects it, it's apt to say, "Don't insult my intelligence," which means don't insult my right to be wrong and still claim to be right. And Saturn is not going to burk that shit. Saturn in Aquarius is heavy duty, it's serious business. I think that Saturn in Aquarius has in many ways been masked over by Jupiter in Aquarius. And so Jupiter's moving on to Pisces. This will, in some ways, lay things back. It'll make the trend more sociable, while leaving Saturn in Aquarius to do the work of its final full year there. Okay, now we're in the midst of Venus retrograde. Venus retrograde begins on, I don't have my dates on this, but the important dates of Venus retrograde were the conjunction of Venus to Pluto on December 11th, and then the second conjunction on December 25th. So the beginning of this Venus retrograde, which is almost always a trip into the underworld of some kind, involved a double conjunction to Pluto, which my friend Liz Shepard aptly pointed out is very reminiscent of Persephone descending down into the underworld to shack up with Pluto for these Northern Hemisphere winter months. This is a very important aspect of the astrology this year, and my take after having read this Venus retrograde like 20 times in 20 different presentations is that it is the kind of final exam associated with Pluto and Cap. Pluto and Cap is 2008 through 2023, and we're now at the end of that, right? We have this is the last full year of Pluto in Capricorn. Incredible to see Pluto blow through the signs. You've been an astrologer a long time when Pluto seems to move quickly. Venus, though, is testing our emotional growth. Venus and Cap, making all these conjunctions to Pluto, is a checkup on attitudes and values. How our attitudes and values have grown, changed, and evolved. Because Venus is all about attitudes and values. There is the question of whether we really want to seek pleasure in having power over others. I think that part of what we've seen emerge in these years is a lot of people, both the big-time tyrants and the petty tyrants, taking pleasure in having power over people. I think that's going to be a little bit less of a thing with Jupiter in Pisces. However, you're responsible for what you believe. Now, sticking with Venus for a second, the retrograde ends on January 29th, and then by this time, Mars is working its way toward Capricorn to make one of its first of several stunning moves of the year, and I think that really this year is going to be about Mars. We really look at what shakes out and what is driving events. Now, Mars is important now because the sign that Mars rules, Aries, one of the two that Mars rules, Aries, is Chiron, and Chiron in Aries also is the thing that is driving self-actualization and true individuation, truly motivating the need for growth in this time, and not just shoving it off and Prozacking your growth out of existence. I mean, it's important to recognize that this drug-obsessed rather than healing-obsessed bout with COVID that we're having is happening in Prozac nation. It's happening in a nation that has given up therapy for taking pills, where there is really no introspection encouraged, and it's all about just feeling good. So that explains a lot, right? If it's like, oh, well, I can just inject that thing or pop that pill as long as it's not Iver or whatever. But if it's remdesivir, that's good. Multiple organ shutdown. So no, clear cancel. Venus and Mars reach the third Venus-Pluto conjunction together. So we've had two Venus-Pluto conjunctions, one on 12/11, one on 12/25. They were both incredibly deep events. And then we're going to then experience Venus going direct in Capricorn, and when it completes its conjunction, the third of three, it will be Venus, Mars, and Pluto. And to me, this is saying it is time to grapple with the questions of sexuality that have been swept under the table. They have been pushed out of existence by the Me Too movement, by the LGBT trans movement, by every movement that would seek to merely politicize sex and make it into some kind of a power game. Well, when sex is politicized and made into a power game, it's never actually addressed as the thing it is, which is a human, emotional, and biological, and loving and growth experience. It's not about power. It's not about politics. This is turning Indian sacred tobacco into 2 packs of Marlboro Lights a day to do this. And so there's, I think, a a massive question of Venus, Mars, Pluto, of are we honoring the evolutionary nature of sex? How about that? Do we care? Do we even meekly consider sex to be any form of a thing that is about conscious growth and self-understanding? Or as often is the case, this discussion is just swept away and left behind. And the discussion of sex is always swept away and left behind because the one doing the sweeping away doesn't want to encounter, embrace the issues, the pain, the guilt, the shame, the general state of sexual agony, isolation, loneliness, and betrayal, past sexual trauma. None of these things are addressed when we sweep things under the rug. And the best way to sweep things under the rug is to say, "Ooh, look, that person there, I support them in their whatever LGBTQ-ishness, and I'm normal monogamous person. I don't have anything. No, they're the thing. I'm not the thing. What do I do? I just fuck like a normal person. They have this big challenge, and look, oh, how terrible McDonald's bathrooms. Give me this shit. The deep down, we are all sexual beings. Deep down, we're all some form of trans. Trans means, as far as I'm concerned, I'm an astrologer, not a chemist primarily. Trans means in movement, transiting. There is no such thing as a fixed sexual orientation. You can try, you can drink all the concrete you want, but it still doesn't mean you don't have a moving, as in transiting, sexual orientation. Okay, so what are we doing with that? Do we care? Kudos to Kelly Brogan for broaching the topics that I have been broaching for the last 25 years. Kelly, a woman, a doctor, psychiatrist. Hey, if a woman says it, it's got to be right. Kelly Brogan is check out some of her stuff. We'll link to it. Okay. What else? Okay, Mars running the table. I've got a few minutes left here in my 29-minute limit on this camera. Mars, I think the first spectacular thing that Mars does this year is this Venus-Mars-Pluto conjunction, March 3rd, March 2nd, 3rd. March 2nd, 3rd, big time, very important time. Big time for Pisces, big time generally. All of the, I think there's so much going on. That's Jupiter conjunct Nessus that weekend or those few days is a kind of a crux point, a pivot point, because Mercury will be direct, Venus will be direct, everything's going to be fully in play at that point. March 2nd, 3rd. Watch that. All right. So then Mars moves on, and Mars there is so much going on from Pisces all the way out through Gemini, where Mars goes retrograde in the autumn, that Mars is involved in maximum possible action because it's going to make conjunctions essentially to just to give an example from the Pisces chart here. Let's get this in here. You can see here's Pisces, and then here's Gemini. And so Mars is going to make at least one conjunction to all of these things. All of these makes one. Then it goes to Gemini, and it goes retrograde in Gemini. It stays in Gemini for 7 months. So Mars is going to stay in this quadrant of the zodiac for over a year. It's going to be in one direction of the sky, means the Earth is near Mars. But each one of these conjunctions that Mars makes, whether it's to Nessus, to Jupiter, to Uranus, I can barely see this, to Uranus, to Albion, to Sedna, that's big, and then to Asbolus, Mars is going to be doing a lot. And Mars in Pisces is a bit of a challenging placement, but one of the things Mars in Pisces is going to do is have Mars make a conjunction to Jupiter. Well, that takes place in Aries. Mars is going to make a conjunction to Neptune this is going to challenge delusions and be kind of a test of how self-destructive people really are. A lot of the delusional thinking we're seeing, and a lot of this "inject my baby first," that we need to challenge this, and Mars is going to be involved in challenging this. Mars, so Mars is going to make conjunctions to all that is in Pisces and square its own retrograde position in Gemini. That's coming up in the spring. Then Mars moves on, makes a conjunction to Chiron. That's a very important conjunction to have. That is going to spark up the self-actualizing spirit, I think. And then on we go. And then finally, Mars retrograde, and I think this is the really important part. Mars retrograde is going to be essentially Mars for 7 months making a square to Neptune. This is not easy, but boy, is it going to be the kind of examination of what is true and what is not. And we really need, and I think this is extremely sophomoric of me to say this, but we need to stop thinking that if we believe something, it's true. We have this idea, and it's always kind of been a thing. I mean, as Paul Simon said, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregard the rest in one of his great songs, The Boxer. But now with the internet, you can be as misguided as you want, and you just put everybody on snooze who you don't like hearing from, or you defriend, debunk, deplatform, and create your own safe space that completely affirms all the things you may believe. Well, we need to burn off that spiritual baby fat. That is not helping. It's not helping. Not helping anyone or anything. And we currently right now are being manipulated by our own obsession with what is not true. And as Mark Twain says, it's easier to fool a person than to convince them that they have been fooled. And admitting that you've been fooled means that you have to admit you were wrong. And if you were wrong and you made irreversible decisions, this is personally where I hit the deepest despair, is thinking about how to work with people who've made profound life-altering decisions that hurt them and that they may regret for the rest of their lives. I'm also concerned about this world that we're leaving to our progeny. We may think we feel safer without any freedom, but when our children read about the lives that we had before all of this, and we admit to how cheaply we sold them out. Okay, I'm running out of time. Thank you. Thank you, Kate, for doing this video. I'll be back with Planet Waves FM and Starcast.fm. Okay, bless, and bye for now.